The hospital ward was unusually quiet that night. Outside, rain tapped gently against the windows, and inside, the soft beeping of monitors filled the still air. Room 413, a private pediatric room on the third floor, was dimly lit by the soft blue glow of a nightlight shaped like a moon. 8-year-old Emily Carter had been admitted 3 days earlier with a mild concussion and leg injuries after a fall at school. Doctors had kept her for observation, nothing critical, but enough to justify overnight care. Her mother had kissed her forehead around 9 p.m., promising to be back in the morning, and Emily had drifted off watching cartoons. At 2:17 a.m., Nurse Janelle walked down the corridor, clipboard in hand, doing her routine checks. When she reached Emily's room, she opened the door quietly, not wanting to disturb her sleep. But something was off. The bed looked wrong. The blanket was still tucked neatly under the corners. The IV pole stood untouched. The heart rate monitor was silent. Janelle stepped closer, her breath catching. The bed was empty. No Emily. She checked the bathroom, empty. Closet, nothing. The window was locked from the inside. There were no signs of struggle, no noise, no alarms. Just the soft hum of the fluorescent lights above and the eerie stillness that suddenly felt suffocating. Janelle hit the emergency call button. Within minutes, the hallway was full of footsteps and muffled voices. Doctors, nurses, and security officers swarmed the room. The overnight supervisor double-checked the patient log. Emily had not been discharged, no family had signed her out, and the front desk had seen no one enter or leave. The elevators had no unusual activity. Even the side exits were locked as per hospital protocol. By 3 a.m., security was reviewing surveillance footage and police were en route. Staff who had been working calmly only moments ago now looked pale and uneasy. No one could understand how a girl with a healing leg injury, sedated with light medication, had simply vanished into the night without a trace. Somewhere in the dark, sterile corridors of the hospital, a terrible question began to form. Was Emily taken, or did she somehow leave on her own? In the flickering glow of monitors and buzzing fluorescent lights, the hospital's security office had turned into a pressure cooker of tension and disbelief. The clock above the doorway read 3:43 a.m., and the cramped room was filled with administrators, detectives, and sleep-deprived staff members who had been roused from their early morning duties. The lead security technician, Vince, clicked through time-stamped footage with shaking fingers, his face pale with disbelief. "We've got every hallway, every stairwell, every exit. There's no way she left this building without being seen," he muttered. The footage showed everything. At 1:58 a.m., a janitor mopping the floor outside room 413. At 2:06 a.m., a nurse walking past with a tray of medication. At 2:17 a.m., Nurse Janelle opening the door and discovering Emily missing. But the time between, when Emily should have been visible in the hallway if she left the room, was blank. Not empty, but static. Detective Marcus Hale leaned forward, narrowing his eyes. "Pause it. Go back to 2:04 a.m. right before the static begins." Vince rewound, playing frame by frame. The hallway showed no one entering Emily's room. Just the faint hum of lights and a reflection on the floor tiles. Then, without warning, the feed dissolved into grainy interference. All 6 cameras covering that section of the third floor blinked out simultaneously at 2:05 a.m. and returned at 2:14 a.m. 9 minutes. Gone. "That's not a glitch," Vince said quietly, sweat beading on his forehead. "These cameras are on separate circuits. For all of them to cut out at once. It's not possible. Not unless someone did it on purpose." Another technician noticed something else. "We did a motion scan for the stairwell and elevators, nothing. But there was an access badge pinged to the basement service elevator at 2:09 a.m. That's 2 floors below where Emily's room is," Hale said. "Who used the badge?" The technician clicked through. "Badge number 2837. But that belongs to a night shift tech who was on vacation. It shouldn't have been active." An eerie silence settled over the room. The building's security had just developed a crack wide enough for a child to vanish, without alarms, without witnesses, and with no clear evidence of who orchestrated it. Janelle, standing off to the side, whispered to no one in particular, she was asleep. I tucked her in myself. There was no one in that room with her. The monitor screens glowed, looping their silent footage. The bed was empty. The hallway was quiet. And the static, brief but unnatural, stared back at everyone like an unblinking eye. The morning after Emily's disappearance, the police station buzzed with a tense energy rarely seen in Winford, a quiet town where serious crimes were few and far between. Reporters were already gathering outside, their vans crowding the curb, while inside, the main conference room had been hastily repurposed into a command center. Maps of the hospital, blueprints of its underground service tunnels, and missing person flyers were plastered across the walls. At the heart of it all sat Daniel and Marissa Carter, Emily's parents. Marissa looked hollowed out, as if someone had drained the light from her completely overnight. Her eyes were swollen, red from crying and the sleepless hours she'd spent pacing her living room while officers scoured the hospital. She clutched a small pink headband in her fist, one Emily had worn that morning and had begged to take to the hospital, just in case her hair got messy. Daniel sat beside her, stiff, jaw clenched, his right leg bouncing uncontrollably. His mind flipped between rage and disbelief, searching for a logical explanation where none seemed to exist. Detective Marcus Hale sat across from them, leaning in, his voice measured but urgent. "We're treating this as a possible abduction. The fact that the security feed went dark and no exits were triggered, it's deliberate. Someone knew what they were doing. But who would take her?" Marissa's voice cracked. She was recovering. She couldn't walk. She was safe in a hospital. That's supposed to mean something. Daniel stood suddenly, pushing his chair back with a screech. This shouldn't be possible. There were nurses, doctors, guards, cameras. How does a little girl disappear out of a locked room in the middle of the night without someone seeing something? Detective Hale didn't have an answer. Instead, he handed them a copy of the Amber Alert notice being sent statewide. Emily's photo stared back, bright eyes, freckled cheeks, a missing front tooth. "We've issued alerts across all counties and into neighboring states. Highway patrols are being briefed. If she was taken by vehicle, there's a chance we can catch it on traffic cams." Marissa buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. A young female officer placed a hand gently on her back, offering comfort that felt unbearably small against the scale of their loss. Later that day, the Carters faced a swarm of media for the first of what would become countless press conferences. Standing on the precinct steps, Marissa held Emily's favorite stuffed bear and addressed the cameras with trembling lips. "She's out there. Someone knows where our daughter is. Please bring her home." That footage would be replayed on every news channel that night. But for the detectives watching from the sidelines, a darker reality was settling in. There were no ransom notes, no demands. Just a silence as cold and deep as the night Emily disappeared, and a sense that this case was going to unravel in ways none of them were prepared for. In the weeks that followed Emily Carter's disappearance, the entire town of Winford transformed. The once quiet streets filled with search parties, news vans, and hand-painted signs taped to storefronts and light poles. Her face was everywhere, on coffee shop counters, church bulletin boards, and bus stop shelters. Her name became a whispered prayer and a shouted plea. "Have you seen this girl?" Echoed from sidewalks and doorsteps, repeated like a desperate mantra. Volunteers gathered every morning at the local high school gymnasium, now acting as a search coordination center. Teams were assigned sectors, abandoned buildings, wooded edges of the town, old barns and culverts. Officers with dogs combed the riverbanks and ravines. Drones hovered over open fields, and divers searched drainage canals and nearby retention ponds. No area was too remote. No theory too wild to pursue. The town rallied, hearts unified in a shared purpose. But beneath that purpose grew a quiet, tightening fear. After 2 weeks with no solid leads, the momentum began to wane. The search parties grew smaller. The media, once swarming the town, slowly turned their attention elsewhere. National coverage shifted to another case. Emily's story, once a headline, became a whisper on the ticker tape. Inside homes and diners, the theories began. Some believed Emily had been taken by someone inside the hospital, a nurse, an orderly, someone who had blended in. Others whispered about a trafficking ring, organized and brutal. A few, including a retired nurse who'd worked on the 3rd floor years ago, spoke of strange noises in the old service tunnels beneath the hospital. She claimed those tunnels weren't just for pipes and wires, there were old wings, unused chambers from before the last renovation. Rooms no one talked about anymore. More fringe voices pointed to the hospital's history itself. Decades ago, the original foundation of the building had been a sanatorium. Whispers of hauntings, of strange disappearances during construction. The stories were old and mostly dismissed, but now, with a child gone and surveillance corrupted, some began to question everything. Detective Hale worked day and night, poring over visitor logs, digital badge scans, and video fragments corrupted during the power glitch. He consulted cybercrime experts. He questioned every person on shift that night, twice. But no one saw anything. No one remembered anything. The only clue, an access badge used at the basement service elevator, hit a dead end. It was tied to a staff member out of the country, the badge last seen inside a locked drawer. Even Emily's parents, once unified in their grief, began to drift apart. Daniel became obsessed, posting theories online, arguing with strangers on forums, chasing shadows and coordinates. Marissa withdrew, unable to bear the weight of hope slowly slipping into despair. She stopped doing press. She rarely left home. She started sleeping in Emily's room, wrapping herself in her daughter's blanket, as if she could will her back. And so, the town settled into a hollow rhythm. A daily ache that never quite healed. Halloween came and passed. So did Christmas, and then Emily's birthday. The missing posters faded in the sun and rain. Some were torn down by wind, others by time. What was once a roaring cry for help became a silence that lingered, echoing through empty playgrounds, quiet hospital halls, and a town that no longer felt whole. Emily hadn't just vanished. She had been erased. But not forgotten. Not by everyone. Not by the ones who kept looking when others had stopped. And certainly not by whatever had hidden her away beneath the surface, waiting, quiet and patient. In the dark places no one dared to look. 2 years and 3 months had passed since Emily Carter vanished from room 413. By now, the case had grown cold, folded into a thick file that sat collecting dust in a cabinet marked, unsolved. For most of Winford, life had slowly moved on. New stories filled the papers, new worries claimed the town's attention. But for those who'd searched, who'd lost sleep and combed every inch of forest and sewer grate, Emily's name still stirred something deep and aching. That name would resurface, loud and terrifying, on a gray Thursday morning, during what should have been a routine job. A 3-man municipal sewer crew had been dispatched to the east end of Winford to investigate a reported backup in the stormwater canal system. The area, a forgotten industrial zone bordered by cracked pavement and rusting fences, had always smelled of rot and runoff. Still, the blockage wasn't unusual: tree branches, trash, the occasional dead raccoon. But this time, when they reached the main junction tunnel, something was different. The water was moving sluggishly, unnaturally dark. As the workers waded in, their boots splashed through thick muck and debris. One of them, Ramon, spotted a tangled object snagged on the metal grate designed to catch large items before they reached the filtration pumps. "Probably a tire or a tarp," he muttered, stepping closer with his pole. But it wasn't. As he dragged it closer, the object surfaced, a clump of filthy, matted fabric, partially wrapped in clear plastic, with something pale and narrow protruding from one end. At first, they thought it was a mannequin arm. Then they saw the hospital bracelet. Faded, barely legible, but still there. "Emily Carter," Ramon read aloud, his voice cracking. Panic rippled through the crew. One of them vomited on the spot. Another called it in with shaking hands. Within minutes, the entire zone was sealed off. Police cars lined the access road. Crime scene tape fluttered in the cold wind as forensic teams suited up and descended into the canal system with floodlights and breathing masks. They retrieved more than just the hospital gown. Stuffed into a torn, black trash bag submerged in the sludge was a doll, Emily's. It was the same one from the photo used on her missing posters, floppy-eared, one-button eye, sewn in red dress. Now waterlogged and streaked with grime. A forensic tech held it up with gloved hands like it was radioactive. Behind it, another tech found a drawing, folded and sealed inside a sandwich bag. It was smeared, childlike, but recognizable, a stick figure girl standing beside a tall figure with no face. Above them was a red door drawn in crayon. No bones. No body. Just the remains of a girl's presence, carefully sealed, stashed in the dark. The discovery made national news within hours. News anchors revisited old footage, displayed side-by-side comparisons of the doll, the bracelet, and the sketch. Experts speculated. Was she alive? Was this a warning? A message? Detective Hale stood at the edge of the canal entrance that evening, staring into the tunnel as dusk crept in. Somebody kept her alive for a while, he muttered to himself. She was down there, somewhere. But the bigger question loomed: why leave these clues now? And what else was still hidden beneath the city, waiting to be found? Floodlights cast long, flickering shadows against the damp concrete walls of the canal system as investigators descended into the tunnels that night. What had once been dismissed as forgotten infrastructure, just part of Winford's aging drainage system, had now become the center of a chilling investigation. The foul stench of stagnant water and rust hung heavy in the air as rubber boots sloshed through murky puddles. Every creak, every distant drip echoed like a whisper. In the dark, Detective Marcus Hale led the team, flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. With every step deeper into the tunnels, the world above faded away. No traffic, no birds, no voices. Just concrete silence and the sense that they were trespassing somewhere they weren't meant to be. The sewer crew had flagged the location of the original discovery, but a forensics unit had since traced the slow current of the runoff and identified a possible origin point, an old junction chamber nearly a mile upstream, sealed off decades ago after city expansion plans shifted. It had once connected the canal to a basement maintenance tunnel beneath an unused section of the hospital grounds. As Hale and his team reached the rusted door to that chamber, the metal protested with a sharp screech as it was forced open. Inside, the air turned colder. The space had clearly been accessed before, recently. Scattered across the floor were the decaying remains of bedding, a soiled blanket, a cracked foam mat, and several food wrappers marked with expiration dates only a year old. A single camping lantern sat in the corner, battery corroded. Someone had stayed here, and stayed for a while. On the wall opposite the entrance, investigators found something far more disturbing: dozens of crayon drawings taped or pinned directly onto the cement. Most had blurred or run from the damp, but a few were still legible. They all followed the same motif: a little girl with white eyes and no mouth, standing beside a towering figure with empty, black circles for eyes. In one image, the girl was shown curled up in a corner, with long, red arms reaching toward her. In another, she stood next to a door, marked by an X, behind which shadows loomed. The most chilling drawing had no people, just words, crudely written by a child: "It talks to me when it's dark." The forensics team documented everything, photographed, bagged, cataloged. But the feeling of unease was more than professional. Hale couldn't shake it. This wasn't a place someone stumbled into, he said to one of the techs. This was prepared. Someone brought her here, set it up. Behind the bedding, they discovered a small, makeshift shelf made of scrap wood and bricks. On it were carefully lined rows of items: empty water bottles, a plastic spoon, a journal too waterlogged to open, and, a final horror, clumps of blonde hair tied into tight braids. DNA tests would later confirm it matched Emily Carter. And then there was the symbol. Scrawled across one of the cement columns was the same red door from the drawing, this time spray-painted, large and crude. Beneath it, the same faceless figure had been etched into the wall, deeper and more detailed than the others. It looked recent. Too recent. The paint hadn't fully dried. Whoever brought Emily here may have returned. That night, the team emerged from the tunnels shaken. Hale stayed behind last, staring back into the black entrance of the abandoned chamber. Something about that space felt wrong, not just tragic, but unnatural, as if the tunnel itself had soaked up the fear and memory of what had happened there. And somewhere deep inside him, a terrifying possibility began to take root. Emily may not have just been hidden. She may have been held, for something. The evidence room at the Winford Police Department was dim and hushed, lit only by the sterile glow of overhead fluorescents. Rows of cold steel shelves lined the space, each tagged with barcodes and case numbers. On the far table, separated from the rest, were the latest items recovered from the underground chamber: the doll, the crayon drawings, Emily's bracelet. But what captured everyone's attention that day wasn't an object, it was a video. A city drainage technician named Ray Foley had come forward. After hearing about the discovery in the tunnels, he remembered a corrupted feed from a maintenance camera that had triggered a system alert about 6 months earlier, at the time dismissed as a faulty sensor. Intrigued and unsettled, he dug up the archived footage, and when he saw what was on it, he drove straight to the station without hesitation. Now, inside a viewing room, the detective team gathered around a large screen. Marcus Hale stood behind them, arms crossed tightly, his face tense as the video loaded. The timestamp: 2:31 a.m., February 12, 6 months ago. Camera: Unit C4 Tunnel Access Point, East Junction. At first, it showed nothing but grainy, night vision footage of a narrow, concrete corridor. A slow trickle of water ran down the middle. The tunnel seemed empty. Then, movement. From the far end, something emerged, low to the ground at first, crawling. A small shape. Human. The room went still. She crept into the frame slowly, on hands and knees. Hair matted. Pale skin. A thin gown. She turned her head toward the camera just once. Even through the distortion, even after 2 years, there was no mistaking her face. Emily Carter. Gasps filled the room. She looked terrified. Her white eyes shimmered in the night vision glow, and for a moment, it appeared she was mouthing something, though there was no audio. Behind her, the darkness seemed to shift unnaturally, like something was moving, just out of view. Then, abruptly, she looked straight into the lens. For nearly 6 full seconds, she didn't blink. And then she vanished, jerking sideways as if yanked off frame. The footage glitched. A blur. Static. When the feed returned, the tunnel was empty. Detective Hale rewound it, playing it over again in slow motion, frame by frame. There, he pointed. Just before she disappears. The technician paused on a single frame. Behind Emily, in the split second before the static, was the faint outline of a second figure. It was tall. Slender. Too slender. Its face, or what passed for one, was a void. Black and smooth, like the figure in her drawings. No one spoke for several seconds. Eventually, Hale broke the silence. If this is real, she was alive 6 months ago. Still in the tunnels. Still close. But how did she get back underground? Was she ever above ground? One of the detectives asked. Another added, who was feeding her? Caring for her? No one had answers. Just more questions. Questions that pushed past crime and into something darker, more primal. That night, the footage leaked online. Within hours, it went viral. Some viewers claimed the figure behind her wasn't human. Others insisted it was all faked, part of a viral horror campaign. But to the people who had spent 2 years searching for Emily, there was no denying what they had seen. She was alive, and whatever had her wasn't finished yet. It had been 1 week since the footage of Emily Carter surfaced online. The town of Wynford, already scarred by her disappearance and the chilling discoveries in the sewer system, was now gripped by something even darker: fear. It wasn't just a missing persons case anymore. It had become something else, something that people whispered about with trembling voices and avoided discussing in daylight. The press called it the Tunnel Girl Mystery. Online forums dubbed it the Watcher in the Drain. But for Emily's parents, and the few investigators still willing to confront the horror, it remained heartbreakingly real. That morning, under heavy gray skies, a gathering was held in the courtyard behind Wynford General Hospital. The administration, under pressure from both public outcry and internal guilt, had agreed to erect a small memorial garden for the children lost under their care. Emily's name, once quietly avoided in official meetings, was now engraved on a brass plaque mounted beneath a flowering dogwood tree. The plaque read, "In memory of Emily Carter, and all children whose voices were never heard." Dozens of people showed up. Some came to mourn. Others came for answers. A few came simply because they couldn't stay away. Emily's mother, Marissa, stood near the tree with one hand pressed against the plaque, her face calm but distant, her eyes fixed on something far away. She no longer cried in public. Her grief had passed through weeping and into something colder: resolve. A quiet, stubborn belief that Emily was still out there, somewhere beneath their feet. Daniel, Emily's father, had not attended. He had grown more reclusive in recent weeks, claiming strange things had been happening near their house. Whispers under the floorboards, damp footprints leading up from the basement, the sound of a child humming in the walls. The police had investigated once. Found nothing. But neighbors said they'd seen him digging in the backyard at night, mumbling to himself, refusing to come back inside until dawn. After the ceremony, a few townsfolk lingered by the plaque, placing small stuffed animals and candles at the base. One woman, a nurse who had worked the night Emily vanished, left a note folded tightly in plastic. She didn't share what it said. She just walked away without looking back. But the most unsettling moment came later that evening. A maintenance worker, tasked with checking lighting near the hospital's old basement wing, came across something scrawled into the concrete wall beside a sealed utility tunnel. At first glance, it looked like red spray paint, but when he touched it, it was sticky. Wet. It formed a crude image, a child's stick figure with wide, dark eyes, standing in front of a rectangular shape outlined in red. A door. Beneath it, in uneven childlike writing, were 5 words. "She's not alone down here." Within hours, that part of the building was locked down. Police and hazmat teams swept the lower levels, but once again, found nothing. No prints. No signs of entry or exit. No human presence. And yet, across town, deep inside the city's canal system, one of the surveillance motion sensors tripped again at 3:12 a.m. The feed didn't show much, just a moment of shifting shadow. Then, barely visible, a pale hand retreating into the darkness. The camera went black, and the silence returned.